This section is called The Widow's Winter Solstice, and I'm calling it that because the winter solstice seems to be an appropriate symbol for the experience that we have as widows. It's the darkest time of the year, and we do notice, even if we're not in grief, we do notice at this time of the year that something different is going on in this darkness. But when we are experiencing the loss of our husband, of the person that we've spent so much of our lives with, it seems as though we can't really see ahead of us, that everything is dark. All of the structures that we are accustomed to have been dissolved. And it is a radical form of creativity. Some of you who wrote me have lost your husband in the very early stages of your relationship. One of you told me the story of having a party and your husband had to go to get something at the store but was killed in an accident on the way back home. Others of you told me about being so passionately in love with someone and losing that person in an unexpected illness at a very early stage of your relationship. Others of you have been with your husband for many, many years. And I think that there are different kinds of adjustments, different kinds of responses to these very different situations. So I found even thinking about talking about the widow very difficult because of these great differences. But there are similarities, and the similarity is that we are in the energy field of the archetype of the abandoned, the orphan. We can call it the archetype of the widow. And when I speak of widow, so much of what I say can also be said for widower, and I will be speaking of husband and wife, but we all know, of course, that there can be two women, two men, or a man and a woman, because what we are talking about is the loss of the beloved, of someone with whom we have shared or have wanted to share our entire lives. So what really is this archetype of the widow or the abandoned, the orphan? Well, when we say orphan, we know precisely that it's that feeling of the most significant persons in our life being absent. It is that absence that is so painful to us. And of course, for the orphan, there is the childlike quality of really not quite knowing what's coming or where to go or what to do. And I think that's not a bad thing, because what happens in this dark night of the soul, or this long darkness, is that if we can sink into that darkness, we are actually sinking into a very active, conscious energy field of the archetype, where many people have been before and are now, and they have done significant creative work in this field. And now we are able to join them, and we are able to gain from their experience and their wisdom, just as we, if we will take this journey actively and consciously, we too will plant seeds in this field, seeds of creativity and healing that will heal us, help to heal the field, and help to heal anyone who enters that field when the husband or the beloved has departed the physical world. So Aboriginal people in Australia, I was just reading the other day, said, you know, we're different from Western culture. We know how to sink into darkness. We're not afraid of the darkness, and we trust the darkness. In our culture, we're so pulled, sucked, you might say, almost to the surface of artificial light and activity, that the physical body has to become accustomed to silence and darkness. And they would say we have to learn to listen to the darkness. There is tremendous wisdom in this field of the archetype, of the abandoned. There is tremendous wisdom there. Actually, we aren't abandoned, but we feel it. Now, when my husband died, I didn't feel at all that I was abandoned consciously. I felt I understood this experience. We had gone through the death of our son 2 years before, and we had learned a lot through that process. But I began to think certain thoughts and feel in a certain way that made me realize that on an unconscious level, I did feel abandoned. Well, certainly all of the structures, the social structures of our lives changed tremendously. I was still going to the same job of teaching in a college nearby, but I was changing, and that made all of those structures different. Some of you have written me about the fact that many of your couple's friends never responded in the same way again, that they didn't invite you because you were no longer a couple. Or others have said that you lived in a part of the world, or even a part of the United States, where the old patriarchal structures were still in effect, and there were many people who believed that as a widow you should behave in a certain way, and you found that very limiting. Well, I think this is a time when there should be no limits. It's when you call the shot, so to speak. It is your experience. It's not anybody else's. And if other people don't want us in their social life for various reasons, then that means that really we can't be creative there. But if we sink down into a place where we haven't yet reconstructed our lives, into that place of emptiness and darkness, we will listen to that, and we will find out who we are now as a single person and what we really want for our lives. What is authentic for us? This is one of the most radical, creative periods that we will have. Because when we're married, there are definite structures that we have created together because we want them that way. And when the beloved departs, we are in a situation to recreate our lives, to find an authenticity within ourselves, which we hopefully did as a married person, but now we must find it as a single person. One of you said it's so difficult to behave as a single person when I really think of myself as a married person. Well, the truth of the matter is that we are always married to the person that we were with for many years, but the relationship has now changed. The husband is in the subtle dimension, the spirit dimension, and we can certainly still relate to that person. But even if we marry again, we still have the relationship with the first husband because we have become who we are because of our love and our relationship with that person. Another way to say it is that when we love, there is no way of separating from the beloved. That person is always with us, no matter what structures we create for our lives. I think that what I've learned in my own experience and feel is that when we work to heal ourselves, we are also healing the beloved in the other dimension. In other words, this work of grieving and healing and restructuring our lives is as important for the beloved and the spirit dimension as it is for us. And our ability to let go of the old structures is so important. After our son's death, my husband had a vision with our son, one of the visions he had, and our son wanted him to work with me to let go of the old structures in the physical world of our way of life, my way of life as a mother with him. And I thought I had, but as I began to release all of the structures, I began to realize that I had a much vaster relationship with him, probably over many lives. A much greater dimension was available to me. And the structure of his mother in this life, in this time, in this space, still existed. It was a very creative, almost like a painting that I could see. So I think that releasing them to be the vastness of who they are is freeing and healing for them as well as for us. I also wanted to say that Carl Jung had said that, they're never just two people in a relationship. That when a man and a woman come together, they are attracted to each other. And there they are, here's the man and here's the woman. But the woman is projecting onto the man unconsciously her ideal inner vision of the masculine. Now that grows in us from the time we are little children. We are constantly developing unconsciously, the ideal image of a man. And that's what attracted us to this man in the first place. Now, he's not going to be that ideal image of the man, but he has enough of it that he could carry our projection onto him. Well, the same has happened with him. He has projected onto us his ideal image of a woman. So as Jung says, there are always four people in a relationship. And this is the alchemical marriage that we're involved in, is that we're getting to know each other and we're learning to differentiate what is the person, who is the person, and what is the image I projected onto that person, and what are those aspects of the masculine that I want to integrate into myself to make myself whole and complete. When we lose the beloved in the early stages, that's difficult, but we can continue that while the beloved is in the other dimension, and we will continue it with other people in our lives. The goal of the alchemical sacred marriage, of course, is to have fully integrated the masculine and the feminine within us so that we can love the other person for precisely who that person is. So I want us to really think in a deep way about the darkness that we may feel ourselves in as a widow. Some of you have been widows for a long time and you still feel this darkness. And I think we need to be kind to ourselves and realize that it takes what it takes. And I think once we learn to be at home in the darkness, we begin to recognize it as a very creative place to be. I had the feeling after my son and my husband died, I felt that darkness and those empty spaces, and I felt a loving voice speaking to me and saying, celebrate the empty spaces, because it's into that space that you can create a new life. Nature can sometimes, and life can sometimes be very violent or feel very chaotic, that a kind of movement of chaos comes through our lives. But that clears all the old structures away, no matter how much we love them and no matter how much we would like to have them back. I think we are called by life, by nature, to be able to remember them with love and let them go. And many times we'll feel ourselves longing for a particular situation of the past. That's okay, but I think we have to really recognize that that structure exists within the subtle world within us, and that we must create in these empty spaces new forms, new structures. And as we become comfortable with that, then we can always go back to it, to regroup and take a drink of water and then begin again. Just before my husband died, I had a dream that was a foreshadowing, really, not only of his death, but of what would occur, how the situation would be after his death. The dream is this: I am in Spain, and I've been shopping with some other women. And when we return to a great cathedral, and there are many steps, and we walk up the steps. But when we enter the door, there's someone standing there, and we just know to give everything that we have purchased to the people standing there. There was that inner knowledge, that inner awareness that all of the material forms that we had would be given up. I gave them over to the person there, and then I saw that there were steps going down deep, deep, deep into the earth, and I realized I had to take those steps down. As I was walking down, I looked over to my right and I saw a beautiful mandala. It was a square part of the cathedral with a circle of people who were dancing, but they were seated, but they were dancing with their bodies. They were all dressed in black. In the center was a person totally in black, a kind of silk covering the whole body, including the head and the face. And that person then was also in a kind of dance state, and all of them together forming a beautiful circle within the square, which is a wonderful mandala of wholeness. And the one in the center then leaned way back, and out of his voice, out of his mouth came the word, the void. And I looked at that and continued to walk down the stairs. Now to my right were some of the women that I had been shopping with, and they were kind of just dancing along on the steps, having no intention of walking down, not wanting to walk down. So I had to laugh about that later to realize that there were aspects of me that did not want to enter the underworld, that dark journey of the soul, once again. But I kept going down. When I woke up, I thought, I wonder what my soul has in store for me now. Because I knew on some level, and my soul was letting me know that on some level it was going to be now once again important for me to enter into the underworld of darkness. But I love the fact that if we do listen to the dreams and the visions and the intuitions that we have, we will be guided through this darkness. There was another dream that I also had before even our son was killed. And I was in the circle of women, and I had a little box of jewels, everything that was important to me in my life. And I was going to each woman, and each woman chose one of the jewels. I took my place back in the center of the circle, and I knew I had an empty box. But I opened the box and happened to look into it. And in it was a rose quartz stone, beautiful, natural stone. And I knew that that was the stone of the loving heart. And I suddenly turned around and I saw that in another dimension, my son and my husband were waving to me and waiting for me to return. This was before either one of them had died. So again, this darkness is filled with wisdom. And if we learn to listen to it, we really will become aware of a loving guidance every step of the way. So I want to end with a myth, an Egyptian myth, you all know it, of Osiris and Isis. There are many stories about the two of them, but the basic story is that Osiris is killed. She, Isis, loses her beloved in the physical dimension. She even has to search to find his body. And when she does find his body, she lays him out on the table. And then she becomes a great bird and she hovers over him, over his dead body. And her wings begin to flutter. And with the very vibration of her energy of grief and love and presence, every act of creativity within Isis brings him into a new form of life. And in that moment, she conceives a child. That's when Isis conceives Horus, who is really a form of Osiris. But the beauty of this myth is that it is through Isis' love and energy and the vibratory energy that she creates in her relationship to Osiris, even in his death, that she conceives the sacred child. And I think that it's certainly there's a reason why the winter solstice is, of course, the longest night, but on that longest night we experience the birth of light ever so gently, so little at first that we don't even know that there is more light until quite a while, weeks, months, we begin to think, oh, there's so much more light. How I've changed. You begin to realize I have changed so much. And of course, the Christ child, the Savior child, is always born at the winter solstice, because that is a symbol of the child, the spirit, the spiritual child that is born in us out of this dark night of seeding, planting the seeds for a new life.